Want to know why I chose tax as a career and if you should too? Stay tuned and keep watching. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Coffee with Kelly, where we'll be talking about self-development, career aspiration, or anything that you might find interesting. So back in my university days, I went into accounting and automatically I thought audit, because that is the route that most people would think of when they think of the accounting profession. Probably with the influence from our friends and families or dramas and TV shows, we think of auditor as a profession when we think of accounting. So little did I know there were a lot of other lines of service at a Big Four accounting firm. So when I did more research and also when I networked with the actual professionals who are working at the firm at campus recruiting events, I found out more about the tax profession and also consulting. So at that moment, I thought, maybe audit might not be the only route, because I actually found tax, when I start network with other people, is actually also a quite interesting field. It is pretty dynamic and it also has a lot of variety. So looking back, I was very thankful that I got into tax as a profession, and as a seasoned tax professional, I actually found that there were a lot of opportunities, contrary to what a lot of people think. So number one, high demand, low supply. So imagine not just personal tax, there are a lot of corporate tax jobs out there in the market. So for example, big companies such as Amazon would have a whole tax team doing their corporate tax returns. And other than corporate tax returns, there's also other tax fields as well, such as M&A taxation, a lot of cross-border or international tax issues. There's also indirect tax, transfer pricing, which we can talk about in a later episode. But tax is a very dynamic field and is a lot more complicated than just, the T1s or personal tax you regularly deal with when you file your own tax returns. And from a big company like Amazon to a little small company or medium-sized company, there's usually at least one tax person in the team, or it can be actually hundreds of people in a tax team at a large corporation. So there are a lot of demand in the job market out there, and there are also a lack of supply, meaning there are actually not too many tax professionals, especially with a certain level of industry experience. So when recruiters might reach out after you get your CPA, and they'll actually mention to you, it's actually very hard to find a tax candidate to fill these positions. So from a job stability wise, it's actually quite a good field to get into. And also tax is not as impacted by the economy and potential recession, because you always need someone in tax, either to do the tax planning to save on your taxes, or to actually do the tax compliance and meet the obligations or regulatory standards. Number two, interesting work. While audit is more on a retroactive basis, where you look at historical and audit the financial statements that already happened, tax is actually more forward-looking. So you can actually do tax planning ahead of time, forecast the tax cash impact. So you can actually provide very high value added information for the company. And also tax is very dynamic. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different groups in tax. And luckily, when I started out at a Big Four accounting firm, I was in the CPA rotational program. So I tried out many different areas of tax, including, private company service, where we only service, companies which are owned by owners directly. So there are a lot of different tax legislation just for that, because there's usually different benefits for small to medium-sized companies. And then there's also, I rotated in financial services. So imagine you'll be looking at funds like mutual fund, trust funds, things like that. So it's a very different dynamic. I also work for high net worth individuals, which are basically doing taxes for people who are very, very, very rich and wealthy, and has a lot of, property and asset for you to manage. And I've also done corporate taxation, where I did specialize in real estate, mining and utilities, and also my focus was on telecommunication, technology, and consumer markets. There are also many different groups as well, such as M&A, where you do merger and acquisition for companies. There's transfer pricing, where you do cross-border, and a bit more complicated for transfer pricing, which we can talk at a later episode. But there are definitely very many fields in tax and highly dynamic. And also you might be able to transfer to different groups to try things out. So it was very interesting for me. And I landed in technology towards the end of my career when staying at a public accounting firm, which was also very different. In terms of the work, there are also the day-to-day is a lot of variety as well. So for example, you do tax compliance, which is, not just returns. There are a lot of elections and forms which you need to file, and the impact of these elections are actually quite big. Some of the penalties get into multi-millions. So it's actually, you feel like you're providing value to our clients when you make sure they don't get penalized, or you make sure things are filed on time. There's also tax provision, which is basically estimating the taxes disclosure on a financial statement. So it's usually busy during January and February, and also quarterly like April, July, October. And then other than the regular routine things like compliance and provision, there's also a lot of consulting work as well. So you'll be able to do memos related to specific tax treatment and transaction. You'll go into the actual law and read the Income Tax Act, and you can also do research on specific tax issues and look at restructuring and transactions. So it can get really interesting, especially the more senior you go at a Big Four accounting firm. So to me, tax was actually quite dynamic and very interesting, and I feel that it was actually value added because a lot of clients actually have a lot of questions about tax in general, just like any ordinary people, they have questions about personal tax. So our clients, even though they might be CFOs or CEOs, since they're not specialized in this area, they also need help from tax professionals in this area. So you kind of feel very satisfied when you're able to help the client. So number 3, work-life balance. So even though people say, tax busy season is horrendous, but compared to audit, relatively is likely a bit more steady. So audit, usually they'll be crazy busy from, January maybe to March. But for tax professional, even though the blackout period, what we call, basically it's hard to take vacations maybe, or you'll be working a bit more hours, or what we call busy season as well, goes from January to around June, because January and February would be helping the audit team with the tax provision and financial statement numbers. And then starting from March to April, if you're doing personal taxes, you'll also be busy. And then May to June would be corporate tax season. Summer is relatively slow, and then the rest of the year there might be ad hoc consulting. But relatively speaking, it's the hours I find is more spread out throughout the year and not as bad comparatively to audit, based on, of course, my discussions with my audit friends, because I haven't myself been audit. But relatively speaking, work-life balance is a little bit better. So hope all of you found these insights to be helpful, especially if you are a university student thinking of getting into tax, or even as a professional, maybe you want to try out tax. So feel free to leave any comments or questions down below, and I'll try to address them as much as possible. And thanks for watching, and see you next time.